that are eligible for that particular election. I think people don't realize that we actually do a signature verification for every ballot that is returned. So first of all, we have what we call an Agilis machine. The ballots come in from the mail-in ballots, or if they drop them in a drop box, and they're run through a big Agilis machine. And in that Agilis machine, there is a barcode. It logs in that the ballot's been returned by that voter, and it also takes a picture of that signature on the affidavit on the return envelope for that voter, and then it's digitally displayed alongside the signature we have on file for that voter from their voter registration record. And then that signature on that return envelope is compared to the signature that we have on record for that voter. If they don't sign that affidavit on that ballot envelope, or if it doesn't match, we then send what we call a cure letter to the voter telling them the signature doesn't match. And they're given an opportunity to sign a form and then allow for their ballot to be counted. So the security is excellent. We track the ballots very carefully. I mean, when they're returned, you know, we account for the ballots that are returned. They're under very secure environment, and we definitely make sure that the person returning the ballot is the person who should have returned the ballot. Our scanners that handle the paper ballots are not hooked to the internet. Neither are our electronic voting machines. Nothing is hooked to the internet as far as the voting equipment. But we also have early voting and election day vote centers. So for people who don't vote by mail for whatever reason, maybe they didn't get a ballot, they might have moved, not updated.
City Council formal meeting. We're continuing to hold our meetings remotely due to the declarations of emergency related to the pandemic and earthquake. While we hold our meetings remotely, we're happy to have you connecting with us online or by phone. Thank you for joining us. To begin, we'll take a moment of silence as we recite the Pledge of Allegiance to ourselves. When we're done, we'll go ahead and turn the video back on. All right, welcome back, everybody. We'll move on to the next item on our agenda, which is welcoming and going over the public meeting rules. So while conducting our meetings electronically is different from our in-person norm, I will cover the guidelines under the public hearing and general comment section of the agenda. So we'll go into that in more detail. We're changing formats a little bit tonight, so I'm sorry if it's a little bit clunkier. Normally I'd give the details here, but I'll give those when we get closer to the public hearing item. So that brings us to item A4, which is the approval of two sets of minutes. The first is the formal meeting minutes of Tuesday, July 14th, 2020, and Tuesday, September 15th, 2020. I'll look for a motion.
For approval of minutes, Mr. Chair.
Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion from Councilmember Rogers and a second from Councilmember Dugan. Is there any discussion to this item? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and roll call the vote. Councilmember Rogers.
Yes.
Johnston is absent. Councilmember Valdemoros.
Yes.
Mono.
Yes.
Dugan.
Yes.
Fowler. Do we have Councilmember Fowler? Okay, it looks like Councilmember Fowler is not present yet, and I'm a yes as well. So that passes unanimously with two council members absent. We'll move on to agenda item number 5, which is a joint ceremonial resolution with Mayor Mendenhall declaring November as Native American Heritage Month in Salt Lake City. Councilmember Johnston had requested to read this motion, but due to an emergency, he's not able to join us. Is there somebody else that would like to read the resolution, or otherwise I'm happy to do it? Councilmember Valdemoros, did you raise your hand?
I can read it.
Okay, great. Go ahead.
All right. So this is a joint resolution declaring November Native American Heritage Month in Salt Lake City. Whereas more than 2,000 Native Americans residing within Salt Lake City are a unique and diverse population representing many tribal nations and their cultural values, celebrations, and achievements. And whereas Salt Lake City is built on homelands of the Northwestern Shoshone, Paiute, Goshute, and Ute, who have called the Salt Lake Valley and the Wasatch Range home and have been stewards of the land for thousands of years. And whereas Native Americans have contributed to the prosperity of Salt Lake City through treaties, resources, lands, culture, traditions, and commerce, and whereas we honor and celebrate the importance of Native Americans and their immeasurable contributions to our city and to our society, distinguishing themselves as scholars, veterans, teachers, athletes, artists, entrepreneurs, and leaders. And whereas we strive to improve communications with, services to, and partnership with all city residents as we journey together on a quest for justice, equality, respect, and prosperity. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Salt Lake City Council and Mayor of Salt Lake City declare the month of November 2020 as Native American Heritage Month.
Thank you, Councilmember Valdemoros. And accepting this resolution is Moroni Benali. Is Moroni with us?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, great. Moroni is with Restoring Ancestral Winds, who is appearing virtually. Thank you for being here to accept this resolution, Moroni. I know normally we would come down and take a picture with you, so I'm sorry we're not able to do that. Is there anything that you want to say?
First, thank you to the members of the council for this resolution, and also to the mayor. We thank you for this kind gesture and this acknowledgement, and we continue to ask respectfully for your sustained commitment by reflecting the needs of Indigenous people, Black people, and other people of color into your city budget priorities. One of the priorities ought to be eliminating violence against Indigenous, Black, and people of color, whether that violence stems from the missing Indigenous women and people's epidemic or as a result of police brutality. Honoring Native American Heritage Month also means honoring the dignity of Indigenous people. Again, thank you for this proclamation.
Thank you, Moroni, and thanks for being here virtually with us.
Thank you.
Okay, we are now at item B of our agenda, which is the public hearings portion. If you have joined us for public comment, since our meeting is being conducted virtually, we're making adjustments to how that process is being moderated based on feedback that we've received from residents. So we're returning to our regular format, which is taking comments in the order scheduled on the scheduled for public hearing. General comments will take place later in our agenda. We're also making a change to help accommodate community members whose only option is to provide comments by phone. Council staff will be accepting public comments through both WebEx and the telephone line. Therefore, you'll be placed in a queue in the order that you log into WebEx, or in the order that you call in for the public hearing, and we will unmute you when it's your turn in the queue. As we continue joining electronically, we do still want to provide a safe space for people to feel comfortable and safe to participate tonight. So to facilitate our public comment period, please be respectful. Avoid yelling or making racial slurs, as obscene or defamatory remarks. The council respects all points of view, and we do welcome new insights. We hope that you'll express those in a respectful and civil tone. If a caller is not respectful, you'll be given one warning. If a caller continues to not follow the council's rules, we will mute your microphone or disconnect the call. Robert Nutzman from our staff is helping to moderate the meeting. He'll be messaging with the attendees to coordinate. Please monitor the chat screen for information and/or feel free to message our staff with any questions you have. Again, the staff member's name is Robert Nutzman. Amanda Lau will be calling the names of the callers and unmuting the lines. Once we open public comment, we will list 3 names at a time so that each person can have some notice and be prepared to speak. If you do not wish to speak, please message our staff and let them know when the host states your name and indicate that you're just here to listen. When it is your turn to speak, the meeting host will unmute your line. Please state your name and the 2-minute timer will begin. At the 2-minute mark, the host will announce time and your microphone will be muted. If you're unable to complete your full comments within the time available, please feel free to mail the City Council at P.O. Box 145-476, Salt Lake City, Utah 84114-5476. Or you can email us at council.comments@slcgov.com. Or you can call our 24-hour phone line, which is 801-535-7654. Let's begin with our scheduled public hearings. Items B1 through B8 involve 8 grant applications combined as one public hearing. Before we begin taking comments, I'll first turn the time over to Sylvia Richards from our council staff, who will give a short introduction on the grant public hearing process and give the name of each grant. Sylvia?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Great. The city applies for and receives grants which help to support and pay for some city programs. Each grant application is reviewed and then receives a public hearing, which gives the public an opportunity to comment on the grants. Tonight, there are 8 grants, and I'll go through them quickly. First is the COVID-19 Local Response Initiative Fiscal Health and Equity Initiative Grant. Second, Main Library Youth City School Age Program Grant. Third, Plaza 349 Youth City School Age Program Grant. Fourth, Sorensen Center Youth City School Age Program Grant. Fifth, Liberty Park Youth City School Age Program Grant. Sixth, Fairmont Park Youth City School Age Program Grant. Seventh, State Asset Forfeiture Grant. And last, 8th, 2020 Edward Byrne Memorial Justice Assistance Grant. Thank you.
Thank you, Sylvia. Amanda, will you please start our first public comment period on the combined 8 grant applications?
Absolutely. Thank you, Council Chair. So for our public hearing on grant applications, we have Eliza McKinney, followed by Emily Allworth, and then Ann Charles. Eliza, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Eliza. I wanted to talk about the grant for police officers to receive the narcotics training, as well as the funding for informants. I just have some questions about what exactly the training entails. It seems pretty vague within the description that the city provided, and I worry about spending money on training for narcotics enforcement when all evidence proves that law enforcement doesn't actually curb drug use, and that in a lot of ways it exacerbates the problem of addiction. So I hope that the City Council really questions what the training is going to be before they okay the use of this grant. I'm also really concerned that it is to fund confidential informants when all the evidence also shows that those programs are really problematic, that there's not a lot of evidence that informants actually provide helpful or beneficial information. It can be really coercive on the part of police officers in those interviews. So yeah, I guess I just hope that the City Council will really consider the use of this funding, even though it's not coming from the city itself, and that they will question the need for this sort of law enforcement. Thank you.
Thank you, Eliza.
And next we have Emily Allworth. Emily, go ahead.
Hi there. Can you not hear me?
We can hear you.
Thanks. I would also like to talk about the grant regarding the state asset forfeiture. The $10,800 requested by SLPD for narcotics-related training and confidential informant funds. I think that with your incredible new scope of work for the Department of Police budget audit, you clearly describe how money for special projects needs to be seen in context for item, teams, categories, and line items they're tied to, and also explaining the costs related to police work outside of standard department, which I would assume that this specialty narcotics-related training and confidential informant funds falls under. I think with this new audit that you're putting in place, it would be good to see that action in work before, like in regard to this. I think this grant should not be awarded because it is not clear enough. I think the one sentence description does not give the citizens or city council enough information to really understand what they want with this $10,800. I think it would also be good to cite the article in the Salt Lake Tribune published on April 14, 2020, that talks about federal agents suing the Utah criminal justice officials alleging multi-million-dollar grant fraud in relation to the Utah Department of Corrections and former members of the Utah Commission on Criminal and Juvenile Justice, CCJJ, which is the very same department that the funds are associated with. I think that that proves that there may be some underlying information that we don't know about, and if we're only given a sentence description, we may not know where these funds are actually allocated to or what they're actually needed to. So I would recommend that this is not passed.
Time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Emily.
And next we have Ann Charles. Ann?
You need to. Hi. Oh, sorry for the echo. I wanted to speak on the same grant because I also, when reading it, I don't really know what narcotics related training is for police officers. If we really want to help people who are involved in narcotics, we should be giving that money to treatment facilities or giving it to the Utah Naloxone group, who does incredible work, instead of giving it to the police, which often perpetuate these issues of addiction. I work exclusively with people with substance use issues coming out of the criminal justice system, and everything I see just shows me that it's re-traumatizing them and getting them further stuck in their addiction. So I don't think giving law enforcement money for anything to do with drug enforcement is a good idea. I think we should be better utilizing our resources. I know treatment facilities could use a lot more resources, and so can the naloxone project. So I would encourage you guys to allocate it there, especially since you guys are revising the budget right now. I think it's awesome, the work you're doing, starting at zero and building up from there. So I would say if you are really looking at revising that, to not be funneling money towards drug enforcement and put that money towards treatment. Thanks.
Hey, thank you, Anne.
Council Chair, that is our last speaker for this public hearing.
Okay, great. Thank you. We will move on then to item number, or I'm sorry, no, we're not. We're going to look for a motion first.
Council Chair, before we had one more person show up at the very last second there. Pamela Starley would like to speak to this item as well, if you're okay with that.
Yep, go ahead.
Oh, thank you, Bobby. Pamela Starley, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
I just wanted to say that I happened to have been talking with a police officer the other day about this subject, and he said his one opinion might not matter all that much, but he said that the police do feel frustrated and depressed sometimes putting drug addicts in jail because they know and they feel that it really doesn't help them or solve the problem. Of course, if the drug addict commits a crime, then that takes precedence and they have to arrest them. But even a police officer said that he thinks that law enforcement is not the main way to deal with drug addiction, that treatment is. I thought that was interesting to hear from a cop.
All right. Thank you very much, Pamela.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I would move that we close the public hearing and defer this to a future agenda.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
I have a motion from Councilmember Fowler and a second from Councilmember Mono. Is there any discussion to this motion? Councilmember Dugan.
So we're going to defer all 8 of them, just not one of them. Is that the motion?
Yes.
Councilmember Fowler, is that what you intended? Okay. Yes.
Okay.
Any other discussion to this? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and proceed to a roll call vote. Councilmember Rogers.
Yes.
Okay. Councilmember Johnson is absent. Councilmember Valdemoros.
Yes.
Councilmember Mono.
Yes.
Councilmember Dugan.
Yes.
Councilmember Fowler.
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well. That motion passes unanimously. We are moving on to item B9, which is an ordinance adopting changes to the city's demolition ordinance. Before we go ahead with public comments, I want to turn the time over to Nick Tarbett from Council Staff Policy Analyst to give a short introduction on the agenda item. Nick?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Perfect, thank you. This proposal would streamline the process for demolitions on commercial and residential properties, remove the requirement for replacement use, landscape plan, and bond, and provide clarity to the enforcement process for aborted buildings. The review of the city's demolition ordinance was initiated by the council in 2016 based on feedback that the current process unintentionally created blight and nuisance issues in some city neighborhoods and was difficult to navigate and administer. At the last work session, the council asked for more information from the administration regarding how fees are calculated and if it would be possible to charge higher fees for nuisance properties. Staff is still working to gather that information together, and we expect to bring that to a future work session briefing.
Thank you, Nick. And does anyone have any questions about that? I do. I have a question. Nick, did we add in the language about the design or the landscaping standards for the applicable zone?
That's part of the follow-up information we're still working on with Orion's group, so that will be coming for the future briefing.
Okay.
So then, Mr. Chair, do we just want to continue the public hearing for a future council meeting?
Well, we should hear the.
We put it on the agenda, so I think we have to hear. Or well, I guess we can pull. Katie, do we need to have the hearing on this?
Mr. Chair, I think I can speak to the council's practice, which is that if you've noticed a hearing, you do tend to accept the comment from those that have registered to comment. So.
Okay.
And we do have a few.
Okay, let's go ahead and move forward with the public comments then.
Great. So first we have Nigel Swaby, followed by Janet Hemming, and then Robert Danielson. Nigel?
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Thank you, council members, for your time tonight. This is the second time that I've spoken on this item, and I am fully in support of it. I'll give you an example why. Near where I live, there are two separate streets that have several boarded homes on them. Two of the homes on 9th West have caught fire 3 times over the last 6 months because of squatters in them. There's not much left for them to burn anymore. Over on 10th West, several of those homes are being complained about as being nuisances, again, with squatters. They have solid fences, so police can't see through them. And this is something that those property owners would like to take care of, but under the current ordinance, they can't do that. So I am definitely in support of making changes to the demolition ordinance so that boarded homes and otherwise blighted properties can be removed and as being an unsightly eyesore, criminal hideout, and hazard to the neighborhood. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Nigel. Next public commenter.
Next we have Janet Hemming, and then Robert Danielson, followed by George Chapman. Janet? Janet Hemming?
Yes, can you hear me?
Oh, yes.
Go ahead.
Honorable City Council members, while the primary intent, the proposed demolition amendment is to give the city more leverage to control abandoned or boarded up structures, the ordinance is one size fits all, meaning it will apply to all sections and neighborhoods in Salt Lake, and that is where so much harm could occur. Most disturbing are the changes to sections 18.64, especially the city's declaration that it will no longer, quote, avoid demolition of buildings in a manner that disrupts the character of established neighborhoods, unquote. This is a death knell to historic neighborhoods like Yellcrest, as well as other cherished locales. It also contradicts the city's longstanding policy to, quote, encourage preservation of the city's housing stock where appropriate, unquote. Other detrimental policies in the new demolition amendments include the elimination of performance bond requirements, landscaping requirements, and public notice requirements. Transparency is the heart of good government. However, these regulations will make the city and builders and developers essentially secret partners in a new process that means average citizens will have little or no awareness of why and when demolitions take place or what will be built on the demolished property. As you may know, there have been 56 demolitions in Yellcrest since about 2000. We are losing some of Utah's most prized historic treasures, while the city essentially sits on the sidelines. These new guidelines will fast-track the demolition process and have destructive consequences for Yellcrest and other neighborhoods. I strongly urge the Salt Lake City Council to not approve the new demolition guidelines until there are amendments to protect and preserve homes in prized neighborhoods like Yellcrest and elsewhere. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Robert Danielson, followed by George Chapman. Robert?
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. How are you? Thank you for your time today. So I'm speaking as somebody who is whose business is located next to one of these nuisance type properties, and I can understand what the lady before was speaking about with regard to preservation of certain homes and whatnot and structures. But the reality of it is, as I stand out here, and I'm here right now with a police officer across the street from one of that nuisance property just by chance, there are people on that property doing drugs. There are people on that property who have committed crimes. There are sex acts. There is sex trafficking going on there. And that's the reality of what's happening. And I just want to speak to the fact that I strongly, strongly urge the council to pass this ordinance. This is a safety issue, not just for the people who are working for businesses in the area and live in the area, but also for people that are homeless, and also for people that have addictions, and also for people that have mental health and get pulled into these situations. So again, I strongly urge you to pass this ordinance for those reasons, and thank you for your time.
Thank you.
And next we have George Chapman. George?
Hey, this is George Chapman. I support the ordinance, and I agree it's a public safety issue, and it'll go a long ways to fight criminal behavior, I think. It should be passed tonight, in fact. As the city goes forward, it should be fine-tuned, not just with plantings and other stuff like that. It should be fine-tuned to ensure the buildings are actually being demolished instead of just being boarded up. I'm not convinced that this ordinance will take care of everything. So it should be continually fine-tuned to make sure that it's working. I also think the city should be open to allowing a parking lot. This city has actually hurt and encouraged vacant buildings by not allowing buildings to be torn down in the parking lot. That's wrong. I think this is a good public safety bill. Please pass it. I'd also like to know, point out that the city has a lot of vacant buildings that we own, and maybe all of them should be torn down, including the mattress company building. All those vacant buildings in the Rio Grande area encourage criminal behavior. Please pass this bill. Those are my comments.
Thank you.
Next we have Ann Charles. Ann?
Hi, thanks. I wanted to comment on this. There was a woman earlier who I thought made a really good point of the people needing to know what's going on and there needing to be more transparency. I worry fast tracking this process would allow corporations and entities to quickly buy up massive amounts of land and figure out what to do with it later, especially with the current unemployment rates and like massive recession that we're going to be going through for quite a while. That's exactly what happened in the early 2000s in so many cities that made San Francisco insanely unaffordable, that made other areas that are pretty similar to Salt Lake potentially really similar. And it could have a huge negative impact on the people who are going to be hit most by the unemployment and hit most by just life. So I would not support this. Thanks.
Thank you.
Council Chair, that was our last commenter for this public hearing.
Okay. Then I'll look for a motion.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I move that the council continue the public hearing to a future council meeting.
Second.
Is there any discussion to this item? I just have a quick question. Was this our first night of hearing on the demolition ordinance or the second?
Second.
Okay. Okay, any other discussion or questions before we go to a roll call vote? Councilmember, okay, we'll go ahead and roll call it. Councilmember Rogers?
Yes.
Councilmember Johnston? Oh, sorry, Councilmember Johnston's absent, obviously. Councilmember Valdemoros?
Yes.
Councilmember Mono?
Yes.
Councilmember Dugan?
Yes.
Councilmember Fowler?
Yes.
And I am a yes as well. That's unanimous with Councilmember Johnston absent. Moving on to item B10, which is an ordinance that would rezone parcels located at 402 and 416 East, 900 South from RB Residential Business District and CN Neighborhood Commercial District to CB Community Business District. Before we open up the public comment, I'll turn it over for a moment to Nick Tarbett from council staff to give a short introduction on this item.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As you mentioned, this is a rezone of those parcels to CB. The parcels currently fall within two zoning districts, the RB and the CN, and the applicant would like to rezone it to CB for consistency. This is the second public hearing. The applicant has expressed support for adding a condition to the zoning ordinance, to the ordinance that would ensure 900 South is declared the front yard for this parcel. That was something the council was interested in and expressed support for. This is an item the council has received lots of public comment, both in support and in opposition to it. So as I mentioned, this is the second public hearing being held.
Okay, thank you. We'll go ahead and open up the public comments. Amanda?
Thanks, Council Chair. Let's see. First, we have, is it Bruce Shapiro, followed by Kathy Adang, and then George Chapman. Bruce?
Yes.
Will you let us know? Okay.
Good evening. I'm an attorney who represents an affected homeowner who owns property adjacent to the proposed rezone site. He is not against development. He is against development that would increase the use of the property adjoining his home to a more intensive commercial use. Without an application for a proposed use of the property justifying the rezone, a review of the current commercial uses in the surrounding neighborhood, and reviewing the uses that can occur in a CB zone versus an RB or CN zone, it becomes clear that the council is being asked to approve a zoning change that is akin to a spot zone of the property. You're being asked to treat this property differently than zoning classifications of commercial development all along the neighboring commercial corridor. The developer is asking for a rezone of the site to increase the density currently allowed on the site without any proposal as to what exactly the developer plans for the site. The many reasons given in support of the rezone, one of the reasons, the main reason, is to fix a split zoning situation. The split zoning situation in and of itself does not support a change of zoning to a more intensive use. The fixed zoning can be accomplished by changing the entire zone of the Southeast Market to the existing RB zone. which would be compatible with the neighborhood. The RB and CN zones are exactly what the developer purchased and is what the adjacent homeowners expected when they bought their property. The current neighborhood consists of mostly single-family homes. The switch to a ZB zone would open the site to more intensive use such as drive-throughs, nursing care facilities, reception center, even a gas station. Further, the conversion to a CB zone would allow the placement of a multifamily unit development on the site, which is clearly not compatible with the existing historic neighborhood. There is no limit on the number of mixed-use units in the CB zone. All the commercial property in the adjacent area falls under an RB or CN zone. Treating this property differently than the other surrounding property could open a flooded rezone request for commercial properties and multifamily units in the area.
Time.
Okay.
Thank you.
Next, we have Kathia Dang and then George Chapman. Kathia?
Good evening. This is Kathia Dang. I'm speaking tonight regarding our request on zoning map amendment for 402, 416 Southeast Market with the hopes to rectify a split zone issue. It's important to note that the subject building, once the OP Skaggs grocery store, has been operating as a commercial property in this neighborhood for over 80 years. We live in a time when fear tactics have proven effective for some, but rather than engage in adverse and false claims currently being dispensed about our objective for this project, I will lean on my sincere desire to do good by way of my actions towards a community I so love. Our property is located in a neighborhood node identified as Liberty Wells, wedged between Central 9th and Upper 9th and 9th. We play an essential role in the city's master plan for the future of the 9-line corridor, a connector connecting people to places. Our intention is to revitalize this block base and current property, bringing it back to life and bringing it up to code. In the words of a man devoted to creating thriving communities one block at a time, the great Harvey Milk spoke of, and I'm paraphrasing, the American dream starts with the neighborhoods. If we wish to rebuild our cities, we must first rebuild our neighborhoods. Concluding his speech with sitting and talking to our neighbors once again, while enjoying the type of summer day where the smell of garlic travels slightly faster than the speed of sound. I'm hopeful that once we find ourselves out of this pandemic, we as human beings will gather once again to laugh, to enjoy a meal, and to support our local small businesses. My desire is to create a space that encourages this culture of bringing people together, defining our place in this shared residential commercial node. I thank you all so much for all of your hard work, especially during this really tenuous time.
Thank you for your comments. Next commenter.
Next, we have George Chapman. George?
Okay. Again, the southeast market is not affected by the zoning change, but the 9-line trail will affect the neighborhood and probably encourage more development, which I'm sure the single-family homeowner adjacent to it be having a problem with it. I urge more public outreach to ensure that residents understand the real effect of the rezoning. Future plans that Salt Lake City has for the street and the 9-line trail. There are some big changes that Salt Lake City is proposing for 9th South, and it's going to have a bigger impact than this rezone on the neighborhood. And I know that parking is an issue, but there are other ordinances and future ordinances that will impact the issue more, and they're not part of this rezone. So bottom line is I urge more public outreach to ensure the residents understand what's coming. That's my comment.
Thank you.
Sorry, Council Chair, I was muted. That was our last commenter on this public hearing.
Okay. Is there a motion?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
and Muscat. I move that the council close the public hearing and adopt the ordinance.
Is there a second? Oh, sorry. Was
Second.
that from? Okay. I have a motion from Councilmember Fowler and a second from, I think, Councilmember Romano and Valdemoros. Is there any discussion to this item?
Mr. Chair?
Oh, yes, go ahead, Councilmember Romano.
Yes, if I may, I'd like to say something about this application.
Sure.
I'd like to make a comment. I appreciate the community for staying involved and engaged in this process. And I also appreciate the applicant for their patience in allowing what was already a very long process to be delayed further, as this item was originally scheduled for public hearings in April. I feel it's important to address a few comments that I've received to make sure that the public and my constituents know that I have looked very closely at the implications of this proposal and have considered their feedback carefully. Many of the comments about this application have stated that the rezone would materially alter the direction of the neighborhood. The proposed CB zone does remove lot coverage restrictions, remove front corner and side yard setbacks, and allow a few additional uses. However, the maximum heights, parking requirements, and permitted and conditional use tables for the current and proposed zones are overall quite similar. It is my conclusion that though nuanced and complex, differences between the residential business, neighborhood commercial, and community business zoning districts are actually quite minor. In recent years, this section of 900 South has developed into what I consider to be one of the best parts of our city. It is a true mixed-use neighborhood, and the city has and continues to invest in the 900 South corridor with benefits such as public trails, road reconstructions, and high-frequency transportation. This application will not materially change the trajectory of the neighborhood, but allow the positive transformations already occurring to continue. Another theme in the comments opposing this application was that the rezone should not be allowed because the developer has not provided a plan for what they will do with the parcel in the future. Though I understand why the lack of a development plan makes it scary for some neighbors, it is actually more in line with how these decisions should be made. Development plans can be adjusted at any time without requiring the parcel to come back to us for an additional hearing. Because of this, even when a plan is provided, the decision should be primarily based on the merits of the zoning district itself, not based on the development plan. Finally, I'd like to let the public know that I've been tracking their comments closely to make sure I knew where they were on this application. More than 60 individuals have commented on the application, either through council comments, through voicemail, to me directly, or by speaking during our meetings. I have read and listened to them all. The majority, roughly 60% of those comments, individuals have spoken in support of the application. Based on these reasons, I feel that supporting the application aligns with the overall city goals, good urban planning principles, my goals for the city and the neighborhood, as well as the vision and goals of the neighborhood held by the majority of the public who have engaged in the process. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Romano. Any other discussion to this item before we proceed to a roll call vote? All right, Councilmember Rogers.
Yes.
Councilmember Johnson is absent. Councilmember Valdemoros.
Yes.
Councilmember Romano.
Yes.
Councilmember Dugan.
Yes.
Councilmember Fowler.
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well. That passes unanimously with one absence. We will move on now to we've taken public comment on the first three hearings, public hearings, and we are now at item B11, which is an ordinance that would approve various changes to the Salt Lake City Code relating to early notification of the public and recognize community organizations for land use projects. Before we open the public comments, I would like to turn the time over to Nick Tarbett, Council Staff Policy Analyst, to give a short introduction to this item.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This proposal would make changes to the early notification of public and recognized community organizations of land use projects. The council initiated this petition a few years ago to clarify the regulations for the early notification process. The purpose is to increase awareness and participation by the public of various type of city projects while still providing a timely review process for applicants. This is the second public hearing on this. And as had happened with one of the earlier public hearings, we are still working with the administration on refining some of the updated information we've requested. So staff would probably recommend that the council defer action on this, but hold the public hearing, but defer taking any action.
Thank you, Nick. Let's go ahead and open the public comments. Amanda?
We have Jason Stevenson. Jason?
Great, thank you very much. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Great, thank you. I'm Jason Stevenson. I'm the co-chair of the East Liberty Park Community Organization, also known as ELPCO. And I definitely get the sense that revising these amendments is like hitting a moving target. But I just wanted to provide a couple of insights from what we've learned as a community council dealing with early notifications. First, I think really the question is whether a project deserves closer attention and whether it doesn't. And the question is, who gets to decide the importance of the project and the resulting course of action? When we get the projects that come across our emails at ELPCO, we often decide, well, that's a pretty easy one. We don't have to pay too much attention to it. People are going to agree with it. And other times we're like, well, that one's a little more contentious. We need to have a meeting. We need to do something about that. So I think the automatic status of all projects should be sort of a baseline option with the ability to raise it to a next level engagement if there's significant interest from the community or from the recognized organization. And what I think that could mean is that the baseline notification is basically what's been in the flow chart. Emails go out to the recognized organizations if they're within 600 feet. You have a mailed notice of everyone within 300 feet of the project, and then you put a nice big stake in the ground with a big poster so that people who walk their dogs next to it can find out what's going on. That's a great way to get people's attention. The next level is you leave it up to the recognized organization to decide whether or not they want to pursue a different event there. They want to have something like a Zoom call, or when we used to have in-person meetings, or even just a meeting on the street to just talk about the project in front of it could be a nice way to do it with social distancing. But the baseline should be something like a city hall, open city hall, where people can put comments, or a combined event at City Hall if we ever get back to those in person. The next level events would be something I think organized by the community organization with support from Salt Lake City Planning or other groups if need be. I think the notifications prior to the Planning Commission meetings are also very important because people only pay attention to these projects when they come up on the agenda. So it's always good to catch those folks at kind of the last minute as well, in addition to catching them when it first gets announced. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comments, Jason.
Council Chair, that was our last commenter for this public hearing.
Okay, thank you. Is there a motion?
Mr. Chair, I move that the council continue the public hearing to a future council meeting. Don't know if that's what Nick wanted.
Second.
I have a motion from Councilmember Fowler and a second from Councilmember Dugan. Is there any discussion to the item?
Can I clarify?
Sure.
Based on what Nick said, I know after my meeting today, we are clarifying some of the ordinance, so we may want to come back for a public hearing. Is that correct? Based on if there are changes, Nick Tarbett.
Yeah, that can be correct. Yes, exactly. If we do, there will be some additional changes, and it never hurts to get public input on those changes we will be asking the council to consider.
Okay, I missed what you said at the very end of your introduction. So yes, Mr. Chair, my motion stands that I would move that we continue the public hearing to a future council meeting.
Second.
Can I ask a clarifying question, Mr. Chair?
Yes, go ahead.
So when we're continuing the public hearing, does that mean people that spoke today cannot speak again, even if they might have comments on the changes that we're going to, or the additional information that we're going to provide?
No, our practice is generally that you can speak again. It's just you can't speak to the same item twice in the same meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
there,
Cindy Guest.
there is a rule saying if a hearing is continued, people can only speak once, and sometimes you set up a second hearing for that purpose. But if you just want to specify that and direct us in that manner on this particular hearing, then that works fine. Just specify that you're not intending to limit the number of times that the speakers, if they spoke this time, they can speak next time.
Okay.
Specify that to us and we're set.
Councilmember Mono?
I would like that. And I'd also like that for the demolition ordinance, if we're going to provide additional information on that piece as well. Because I think if something changes or something is added, we should let the same people speak again.
I think we can, I don't think we can take a vote about the demolition ordinance as part of this, but I think we can make that decision at the next hearing or the next council meeting. So Councilmember Fowler, would you consider that a friendly amendment to your motion?
I'm assuming this is coming from Darren, and I would say yes, since Cindy can't make a motion.
Yes, Darren was saying that as part of the amendment to add the direction that Cindy was asking for.
Great.
Okay. Councilmember Dugan, is that still acceptable to you?
Yes, I second it still.
Okay, thank you. I have a motion from Councilmember Fowler and a second from Councilmember Dugan amended. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and roll call vote it. Councilmember Rogers.
Yes.
Councilmember Johnson is absent. Councilmember Valdemoros.
Yes.
Councilmember Mono.
Yes.
Councilmember Dugan.
Yes.
Councilmember Fowler.
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well. That passes unanimously with one absence. That brings us to item B12. Let's see. An ordinance that would amend the RMF 30 low density multifamily residential zoning district and corresponding sections of Salt Lake City zoning ordinance. I'm going to turn the time over again to Nick Tarbett from City Council staff to give an introduction to this item.
So the good news is this is the last time you have to hear from me tonight. This is an item that staff has recognized over the past few years that the zoning standards of the RMF 30 do not allow for creative housing development that are rather restrictive. So the proposed amendments would allow more multifamily housing that would be compatible in size and scale with existing buildings in the RMF 30. Concerns have been raised that these amendments will incentivize the demolition of existing buildings, which could potentially result in the loss of older housing, which is more naturally affordable. So the council has asked staff to work with planning to do some further analysis and research on this. So this is like the previous ones where we would recommend the council continue the public hearing, and we will come back to you once we have that information for a follow-up briefing and continued public hearing.
Okay, thank you, Nick. Amanda, would you go ahead and open the public comments?
Sure thing. We have Nigel Swaby, Janet Hemming, and George Chapman. Nigel?
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
All right, thank you very much. Again, council members, what a wonderful idea for a zoning change. I am fully in support of this. I think it can make projects viable that wouldn't otherwise be, not only because of the different housing types that can now be built, but also because of the reduction of restrictions for lot size and frontage. Neighbors are, one of the things that really stood out to me is it allows for different types of housing, cottages, tiny homes, and I think that neighbors are more likely to support projects like that with something that has 4 smaller homes than 1 2-story boxes as what we normally see in 4-plexes or 8-plexes. So I'm fully in support of this, and I hope that you can get it passed as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Nigel.
And next we have Janet Hemming. Janet?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, go ahead.
Honorable council members, I wish to express my objection to the proposed text amendments to the city's RMF 30 regulations. Because the proposed affordable housing ordinance is not yet in place, you are actually, I believe, putting the cart before the horse, because approval of the RMF 30 amendments won't incentivize inclusion of affordability in new housing development and could harm naturally occurring affordable housing, or NOAA. Have you carefully considered that increasing density increases land prices, which will increase housing costs? I see a scenario where this approach will trigger gentrification in our historic neighborhoods. I support policies that will reduce barriers to housing and affordability. Yet economically, this text amendment and RMF 30 zoning puts property owners in historic districts at a greater disadvantage because they can't benefit from the proposal. My specific recommendation is that approval of the zoning text amendment should not take effect until the city has considered and enacted an updated meaningful housing demolition mitigation, or no net loss. Let me quickly explain what no net loss means. Yellcrest, as I previously explained, has lost 56 homes to demolition since 2000, most of which have been replaced by homes costing $1 to $2 million, homes that most Utah residents can't afford. Often these million-dollar babies are resold just a few years later at even higher prices, suggesting profit motives. Why not require a single-family zone property owner who opts for demolition to contribute a non-taxable deduction that is equal to 15% of the new building costs into a housing trust fund? These monies can be used to develop affordable housing on land elsewhere. I urge you to first bring the proposed affordable housing overlay to the forefront and let everyone in the city see the wording and your true intent before passing this RMF 30 zoning amendment. Thank you.
Thank you.
And next we have George Chapman. George? George, are you there? George Chapman?
Yeah.
Oh, there you go. Okay.
Can you hear me now?
It's a little soft,
Hello?
but oh, there you go. There you are. Thank you, George.
Can anybody hear me?
Yes.
I can't hear you.
We got you, George.
Can anybody hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I agree with the experts. This proposal will hurt affordable housing, and it'll effectively push developers to make more money with studios and one-bedroom units, which actually affect our schools also. This rezone proposal should not take place until the city has inclusionary zoning, because that's the only thing that could mitigate this disastrous proposal, since developers are pricing most new units at a high market rate compared to older residential buildings, like the Hawthorne Apartments that the Salt Lake City administration gave permits to refurbish the apartment buildings, and they threw out all the affordable renting tenants. So that's what the RMF 30 does. The same thing that happened with the Hawthorne Apartments, the RMF 30 proposal is going to do citywide. The developers are going to take the buildings, throw out the low renting tenants, and redevelop it to market rate. And that's the exact opposite of what you're trying to do. Please do not pass the RMF 30. If you want affordable housing, use 80% of the property in this city that is not being used for residential. Use the 80% of that property. That's what you should be focusing on. Please do not hurt affordable housing by passing this bill or ordinance. Too much time with the legislature.
Thank you, George.
And Council Chair, that was our last speaker on this public hearing.
All right, thank you. So council members, I just want to bring something to attention. The administration has brought it to my attention that on the grant hearing applications for the youth city governments, that if we don't approve those grant applications tonight, that we might have to cover funding from fund balance. So if anybody is interested or would like to make a motion to reconsider that item, we can.
Hey, Mr. Chair, being on the prevailing side, I'd like to recall that vote.
Thank you, Councilmember Rogers. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion from Councilmember Rogers and a second from Councilmember Fowler to go back and reconsider the grant applications related to Youth City. Is there any discussion to this item? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and recall it. Roll call it. Councilmember Rogers.
Yes.
Councilmember Johnston is absent. Councilmember Valdemoros.
Yes.
Councilmember Mono.
Yes.
Councilmember Dugan.
Yes.
Councilmember Fowler.
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well. We will go back to that item on the agenda. That was items
B1 through 8.
B1, yes.
And Mr. Chair?
Actually, it was B, yes. Well, B1 is about the COVID-19 initiative, and then B2 through B6 is the public or the youth city, and then we have the state asset forfeiture, and then the JAG grant. So which ones do we want to?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I'd like to make a motion.
You can hold off on the asset.
On the Cindy Gus Jensen, did you say that we can hold off on the JAG and the forfeiture?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
My motion was going to be that we move forward with items B1 through B6, put it on tonight's consent agenda, and continue and defer action on B7 and 8.
Thank you. Is there a second? Was it Councilmember Rogers or John or Duke?
Yes.
Thank you. I have a motion from Councilmember Fowler, a second from Councilmember Dugan. Is there any discussion to this item? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and roll call it. Councilmember Rogers.
Yes.
Councilmember Johnson is absent. Councilmember Valdemoros.
Yes.
Councilmember Mono.
Yes.
Councilmember Dugan.
Yes.
Councilmember Fowler.
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well. We'll move those items to the consent agenda. Thank you, council members. Let's skip down to, we're on item B12.
No, we still have the motion on the RMF 30.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to call that out of order, but sorry. So we've had our public hearing on the RMF motion. Does a council member want to make a motion on that item?
Yes, Mr. Chair. I'd like to move that we continue the public hearing.
Second.
Thank you. I have a motion from Councilmember Rogers and a second from Councilmember Mono. Is there any discussion to this item? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and proceed to roll call. Councilmember Rogers.
Yes.
Councilmember Johnson is absent. Councilmember Valdemoros.
Yes.
Councilmember Mono.
Yes.
Councilmember Dugan.
Yes.
Councilmember Fowler.
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well. That passes unanimously with one absence. Okay, we will move on to, thank you for catching that, Councilmember Dugan. We are now on item B13, which is an ordinance that would approve the updated draft of the master plan for the Salt Lake City Cemetery. Before we take public comment on that, I'll turn the time over to Austin Kimmel from Council Staff Policy Analyst to give us a short introduction to this agenda item.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Council members, just a few points about the cemetery master plan. The purpose of this master plan is to serve as a framework for future preservation efforts and identify funding options for said efforts. The estimated cost of the recommended repairs and projects is equal to about $30 million. If this plan is approved, $30 million will not be allocated automatically. Rather, it will serve as a guide to the administration to identify funding options for future improvements. Although the council is not bound to fund recommendations identified in the proposal, the master plan may serve as a guide for future city council budget negotiations. This is the second public hearing on this item, and with that, I will turn it back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Austin. Amanda, can we start the public comment on this?
Absolutely. So we have Emily Allworth and Pamela Starley. Emily?
Hi there. I would like to air my support for the cemetery master plan. I want to comment that I really specifically love the idea of creating an arboretum there. I think it would be really easy to do and really great way to go forward with our cemetery plan to become more like some of the really notable cemeteries in major cities. I think there's really great examples on there of comparable potential plans for the cemetery, and I love the idea of having signage or identification with trees, and would also love to put in a comment that an option for memorial plaques on trees, whether they be existing trees or for new planned plantings with some of the new trees that are going to be added to the property, could be a really great idea as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily.
And next we have Pamela Starley. Pamela?
Hi there. I didn't write out my comments, and I'm going to hurry and hope that I can fit them in. First of all, I want to say it's hard for me to feel confident about submitting emails to the council when I don't ever hear anything back. I don't know if you're probably not able to do that, but I already did send in some comments about the cemetery, and I just don't know if anybody ever read them. And I sent in comment today about something else. So I know that sending emails saves time, but it's hard not to want to speak. Anyway, about the cemetery, I agree with the previous commenter, but I do think $30 million is just too high a price tag. I did read the master plan, and I liked everything that was in it, but it was like, maybe we just can't afford to do everything we want to do. And I would just challenge the people that are designing the master plan to try to cut those costs down a little bit. And I have some little examples. For instance, this might sound trivial, but it's just an example of trying to shave down costs. If you've ever noticed those really neat, heavy benches, metal benches up at the state capitol, they can seat like 3 or 4 people. And benches are listed in the master plan. Well, instead of maybe spending the money for those, get just heavy iron chairs, something smaller and more affordable. Or the master plan had a picture of a wall that had urns in it in chambers. And the picture was probably just an example picture, but the picture showed what looked like kind of expensive marble or sandstone. And they could save money by making that structure out of field stones, which would be kind of a local kind of tribute to the area, to just scale down the cost of that. And then also there are certain segments of the cemetery that have a large entity of time. Okay.
Thank you, Pamela.
Council, that was all the comments we had on this public hearing.
Great. Thank you. Council members, is there a motion?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I move that the council close the public hearing and adopt an ordinance adopting the Salt Lake City Cemetery Master Plan.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion from Councilmember Mono and a second from Councilmember Fowler. Is there any discussion to this item? All right, then let's proceed to a roll call vote. Just want to thank the staff for their hard work on this, and this really will be a huge help to preserving this important asset for our city. So thank you. Councilmember Rogers.
Yes.
Councilmember Johnston is absent. Councilmember Valdemoros.
Yes.
Councilmember Mono.
Yes.
Councilmember Dugan.
Yes.
Councilmember Fowler.
Yes.
And I am an enthusiastic yes as well. Thank you. So that passes unanimously with one absence. Let's go ahead and move on to agenda item B14. We're midway through our scheduled hearing items. We have 2 remaining. Item B14 is an ordinance that would amend the zoning map and future land use map for property located at 833 South, 800 West, or East, excuse me, 800 East. Oh gosh, I'm sorry. I was going to ask Brian Fulmer. Sorry, I meant to call on you. Would you go ahead and give us a brief intro to this item?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. The property owner is requesting the property be rezoned from R2, which is single and 2 family residential, to RMF 45, or moderate and high density multifamily residential. The future land use map designation would also change from low density residential to medium or high density residential. The applicant also owns the adjacent property at 847 East, 800 South, where the Telegraph Exchange building is located. Under the proposal, both properties would be consolidated into one parcel for the development of a total of 23 residential units. And tonight is the second public hearing on this topic.
Thank you, Brian. Amanda, will you go ahead and open up the public comments?
You got it. I see we have 11 commenters for this one. So we'll start with Jason Stevenson, followed by Kirk Huffaker, and then Marian Flores. Jason?
Thank you. I'm Jason Stevenson from the East Liberty Park Community Organization. As I mentioned in my prior comment, ELPCO reviews all the projects that come through our inbox. Some we like, some we ask for adjustments, and a few we oppose. So what is it about Telegraph Exchange that convinced us to oppose it? Well, this isn't your typical not in my backyard reaction. First, 6 years ago, residents of this block of 800 East worked to rezone the 833 South parcel adjacent to the Telegraph building from RMF 30 to R2 to match the current housing on the street. When Mr. Peters purchased that parcel in 2018, it was already zoned to R2. We all know that downzoning is not a quick or easy process, and the residents of 800 East, many of whom would still reside on that street, and you'll probably hear from them tonight, did it to maintain a neighborhood with accessible and affordable housing. So if residents shouldn't have the power to determine their own local zoning, why should a developer not only be given that power, but also the authority to override the residents' own efforts? Second, I'd like to say that the changes represented by this project are a significant shift in scale for this block. It's not apples to oranges, it's really apples to pumpkins. More people could move into the 23 units of Telegraph Exchange lofts than currently live right now on this block of 800 East. And third, while Telegraph Exchange will add 23 units where 2 existed before, let's look at the cost benefit. It would remove 2 units of affordable housing and replace it with 23 market rate condos priced similar to what's nearby at Nexus on 9th, where rent is about $2,500 a month for a 2-bedroom. If the goal of the city is to preserve and build more missing middle and affordable housing, why not start right here on this street with this model where it already exists? We ask that you preserve the neighborhood's existing community master plan and zoning map, and we urge Mr. Peters to put forward a new design that adheres to what exists now and what the residents have asked for. Thank you.
Thank you.
And next we have Kirk Huffaker, followed by Marian Flores, and then Ralph Nagasawa. Kirk?
Good evening, honorable council members and Mayor Mendenhall. My name is Kirk Huffaker, and I'm a historic preservation consultant working with the 800 East neighbors. As you've heard, the neighbors are not in favor of the zoning change request, as it is upzoning the parcel north of the historic Telegraph Exchange building. So we respectfully request that you deny the application tonight due to the negative impacts it will cause. This issue really boils down to being about affordable housing, neighborhood and local self-determination, and historic preservation. The R2 parcel, the R2 zone parcel at 833 South 800 East was among those that was downzoned 6.5 years ago. It was set aside as part of this comprehensive planning effort, which is a successful example of local self-determination. If it were now upzoned, moving it from R2 to RMF 45, it would be a violation of that locally initiated planning effort. Upzoning ignores the historic merits of the two houses on the current parcel and how they contribute to the neighborhood's character. It also sends two well-maintained residences and a large garage to the dump, which is environmentally equal to over 200 tons of material. Upzoning is tacit acceptance of a less than optimal site plan, which draws traffic into the lower density residential area. And the Telegraph Exchange building, while historic, significant, and worthy of adaptive use, is not the most historic building to be saved in the city and could be redeveloped under another scenario if this developer walks away. Many neighbors have put years and decades into revitalizing this neighborhood and reinforcing its existing character. The neighbors believe this proposal undoes that work and is a violation of what amounts to an agreement with the neighbors that has leveraged their investment. To avoid the negative consequences of the upzoning request, we strongly encourage you to deny the application. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you.
And next we have Marian Flores, followed by Ralph Nagasawa, and then Sebastian Hoch. Marian?
Hi, this is Marian. I am actually one of the people that spearheaded that work 6.5 years ago on the zoning on our street. We've lived in our house on 800 East for almost 20 years, and many of my neighbors have lived here even longer. We are committed to our neighborhood, but also understand the need for Salt Lake City to continue to evolve and provide homes for more residents. As neighbors, we are expected to adhere to zoning laws and the vision of the master plan, which we helped craft through long collaborative work with City Council and planning. In this instance of the proposed creation of 23 units and a rezone from R2 to RMF 45, even higher than what we started with, we were denied due process as the project sailed through the Planning Commission without public comment on the second time, as the developer held us hostage with threats of demolishing a historic building, which I really hope he wouldn't do. I don't believe he would. The developer purchased the additional 2 houses zoned R2, although he has never had any intent of respecting that zoning, even boasting to us over our opposition that he doesn't need to worry about it. He'll get it changed. This idea of ignoring existing zoning laws is not something that we as residents have ever experienced. We, with the support, as you've been hearing, of our community council, ELCO, would be happy to work with a developer on our street and have supported several innovative projects that have revitalized our street. But in this case, we will lose 2 historic houses simply to meet the developer's need for financial gain. I ask you to consider the process, consider the loss we will see of these 2 houses, and consider the possibility of promoting development that meets the zoning requirements and enhances the street. The project as it stands dwarfs the street and has not met the requirements for landscape buffers. I heard we talked about that earlier in the meeting, and adds more residents to the street than it currently has. We are not against development, but we would like to support a project that meets the city's carefully considered guidelines to protect our neighborhood. I'm so grateful for all the support we have in our neighborhood and in our community council. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And next we have Ralph Nagasawa, followed by Sebastian Hoch, and then Cindy Cromer. Ralph?
Ralph, can you hear me? Ralph?
Cindy Lou, were you able to connect Ralph? I will proceed with the next commenter, Council. So next we have Sebastian Hoch, followed by Cindy Cromer, and then Mike Roskelly. Sebastian?
Yes, hello. First, I would like to thank the council and the mayor for serving our city and for giving us the opportunity to publicly share our opinion. I live on the block of the proposed project, and while I'm very much in favor of redevelopment and preservation of the telegraph exchange building, I very much oppose the presented plans. And the plans that are presented by the developer are in direct opposition of the central community master plan's idea to conserve neighborhood residential character and to ensure that new multifamily developments are carefully sited, well-designed, and compatible in scale. It is also in direct opposition of the recent efforts of our community to preserve the neighborhood that resulted in the rezoning to R2 that was just mentioned by our neighbors, and which was exactly aimed to prevent this kind of planned developers overreach. Examples of the characteristics of the proposed plan that are not compatible with the neighborhood are the vast amount of units that would go in, basically more than double the current residences. So it's clearly not in scale. Second, the disregard and thus the request of changes to required setbacks in addition to the rezoning, further changing the neighborhood's character. The additional height of 3 stories, changing the neighborhood character, and then also the gated character that is, it's not a gated community, but it's a gated character that would result into squeezing an additional pool onto the property. I'd like to stress that we are in no means in opposition to the preservation of the historic telegraph exchange building within its current RMF 45 zoning and the adjacent lot within its current R2 zoning within the required setbacks. Recent changes in our street renovations and remodel on properties on the north end of the block clearly show. Thank you for, I hope you can oppose this rezoning.
Thank you.
Next we have Cindy Cromer, and then Mike Roskelly, and then we'll go back to Ralph Nagasawa. Cindy?
Hi, obviously my name is Cindy Cromer, and tonight I'm feeling my age. I am the only person still standing who has participated in all of the master planning relevant to this petition, going back to the late 1980s. Nothing in these 30 years compares me to support the proposed rezoning. The current zoning of R2 is consistent with numerous efforts to stabilize the neighborhood and the adjacent business district. The Telegraph building itself has received far too much attention, in my opinion. It is not the most important building in Salt Lake. It has been dead space for the 48 years that I've been here. The developer would have you believe that nothing is more important than what he proposes. The structures which have not received enough attention are the 2 houses slated for demolition. They have been well maintained and continuously occupied for decades. They will never be replaced in Salt Lake's housing options. They are headed for the dump. We need to spend more time addressing what Salt Lake would be losing. In fact, the only way I can justify the demolition of these houses for the proposed multiple unit building is that the city will receive more property tax revenue. You can certainly make your decision based on income to the city. This proposal is what the developer wants, despite the fact that there are other ways to save the Telegraph building. And the developer's proposal will generate more tax revenue than a vacant building and 2 well-maintained houses. The tax revenue was the consistent basis for decision-making in the Cordini administration. That's how we got a housing mitigation ordinance, which has never worked to protect housing units. It favors increased property taxes over funding for housing. So this rezoning is not about the preservation of the Telegraph building, which could be redeveloped under other scenarios and other zones. It is about the loss of what the city has committed to support in the neighborhood and in the rest of the city. The benefits of the new luxury units will not trickle down. The existing single-family residences will go to the dump, and the city will gain additional funds through increased property taxes. Thank you. As
Thank you.
always.
Thank you.
Next, we have Mike Roskelly, and then we'll go back to Ralph Nagasawa, followed by Brian Tebben. Mike?
Yeah.
Hey.
In this neighborhood, and love
Brian, you're cutting in and out. We can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I heard that.
I'm a homeowner in this neighborhood. I've lived here 5+ years. I love this neighborhood. I love the old trees, the architecture, and the Telegraph Exchange building has particularly captured my imagination. It's such an icon of the neighborhood. I've always feared that it would be torn down in the name of progress. So I was more than excited to hear that Micah had bought the building and was planning on restoring and repurposing it. To me, Micah has been conscientious about the impact the project will have on the neighborhood. He's reached out to us. He showed his plans. He's received and responded to our input. And although modern, Micah's architectural plans seem to be informed by the Telegraph building itself, as well as the surrounding houses. Micah's plan include common space that will promote community and inclusiveness. Micah's plans are conscientious on the environmental impact. His plans include renewable energy to light, cool, and heat the dwellings. As a person who loves this neighborhood and has always loved the architecture of the Telegraph building, I'm really excited about Micah's project, and I'm totally supportive.
Next, we'll go to Ralph Nagasawa, followed by Brian Tebben, and then Greg Joy. Ralph? Cindy Lou, are you connected to Ralph? I think we'll go ahead with the next commenter and keep trying to connect with Ralph. So next we have Brian Tebben, followed by Greg Joy, and then Brad Waltman. Brian?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Like many of the speakers tonight and in the past meetings, I'm not against this development. I live in the neighborhood right at the corner of 800 East and 900 South. I also work in the neighborhood. This is an architecturally eclectic neighborhood, very old homes and some newer boxier ones coming in. In fact, the house next to me was torn down a couple years ago. A modern house is being put in. I have no problems with that. That just reflects the architectural diversity of where we live. I'm also not against townhomes. It's my opinion that many of the townhomes going in recently look like they're sort of out of the mid-century Soviet school of design and architecture, but I guess that's neither here or there. I'm against the project partly because of what others have said about it recently, the property being recently rezoned, and certainly it's in the developer's ownership to do what he wants with this property. I think my problem is the city bending over backwards to change the zoning for someone who is going to tear out a couple of homes. Now, many things have been said about those homes tonight, but I want to give you a little different perspective. I have known many of the people who have lived in those homes. They no longer live there, but many of them were single parents. Many of them were working third shift. Their children were going to neighborhood schools, East, Judge, Lords, Benyon. They were going to Smiths. They could have never afforded to live in this neighborhood without being able to afford those homes. And one was Mary in particular. Mary's the mother, and her daughter was Cassandra. They're friends of ours, and they grace this neighborhood with their presence. And it makes me sad that this neighborhood in particular, and the city in general, is being a very expensive place for people who love this city and they can no longer live here. So I am against this project. Thank you.
All right, next we'll go to Greg Joy, followed by Brad Waltman. We will give Ralph another try. Greg?
Good evening, council members. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes? Okay, that's a yes. Thank you for this opportunity to speak with all of you. I'm here to support the Telegraph Exchange Lost project on 800 East by Clearwater Homes. I own 2 houses in the 9th and 9th area, and I work in the area as well. In fact, one of my houses is on 900 East and one is on 900 South. Both are within 2 blocks of the Telegraph Exchange Lost project. Tonight, about 6:45, I was walking past the building and thought of all that has happened since this building was built, both in Salt Lake City as well as the world. It would be such a shame to lose it. I appreciate the efforts of the developer to preserve this iconic building. I believe it will be an asset to the 9th and 9th area and benefit the local merchants. Salt Lake City is growing, and that's a fact. Change is a certainty, but it has to be the right type of change. I've seen a number of developments around SLC that don't fit into their community. Some are even close to 9th and 9th. You need developers who build for growth while preserving the history of the community. It is my opinion that Clearwater Homes has a plan that will preserve the history of this building, and at the same time plan for the future with items such as the electrical vehicles charging stations and the obvious growth that the city is going to have. I encourage the council to approve this project request. Thank you.
Next, we'll go to Brad Waltman, and then we'll return to Ralph Nagasawa. And then we have Micah Peters. Let's see. Just one moment. Brad?
Thank you. I would like to offer my support for the Telegraph project, and I work in the neighborhood at 925 East, 900 South as an architect, and my wife and I also own a store in the neighborhood. And as we've talked about, Salt Lake City is growing. There is demand for housing. And looking at this project, I feel that it strikes the right balance of offering and meeting new housing demand with the preservation component for the Telegraph building, and also understanding the real context of what is around this project. Understanding the location of Smiths, which to me is kind of the bigger urban planning nightmare that exists in the neighborhood. And I feel like this scale of this project is appropriate for kind of the next level of density that's needed for the neighborhood to grow and flourish. Many of the neighbors enjoy all the amenities of walking to restaurants, bars, retail, but they also don't want to have their neighborhood affected by those amenities. I just think that's not possible. And there are plenty of other places in the city to live if you don't want anyone to park on your street. And, you know, not to be that harsh, but I just feel like that's the reality of living in such a diverse neighborhood. So once again, I'd like to offer my support for this project. Thank you.
Okay, we will return to Greg Nagasawa, and then followed by Micah Peters, and then Ann Charles. Ralph?
Thank you. Thank you, council members and Mayor Mendenhall. My name is Ralph Nagasawa. I'm a principal at Emit, the architect. I've been with Micah.
Ralph, you got something turned on where you're echoing infinitely, and we can't hear what you're saying.
Chair, this may be the phone link that we were a little worried about.
Okay.
So I don't think it's the caller. I think it's our new system we're trying.
Okay.
Could we go to Mr. Peters and then see if Cindy Lou can help us with this gentleman?
Yes. Thank you.
Alrighty, we'll keep trying, Ralph. So next we'll go to Micah Peters and then Ann Charles. Micah?
Council members and mayor, thank you for your time. My name is Micah Peters. I'm the applicant here tonight. A lot has been said about density on this project. Our current zoning for our two parcels allows us 18 units. And again, we are trying to just return the 833 lot to its previous zoning of RM35 in order to assist us in justifying the preservation of the historic building. The existing zoning on the 833 South has the ability for us to place buildings 8 feet from the side yard setback to the transition to the single family to the north. And our current plan has a much more thoughtful setback at 24 foot 5 feet with an additional 4 foot landscape buffer to make that transition from multifamily to the single family very comfortable and appropriate. With that land plan, we received approval from the Planning Commission. The 8th East and Chase Avenue frontage that we have on our two parcels is over 400 feet of frontage. And when the general downzoning from RM35 to R2 was achieved, it was a blanket downzone. It didn't consider the specifics of this corner parcel that has such tremendous frontage. The previous caller mentioned some of my residents in the houses on 833. And yes, they were wonderful people. They moved to Ireland about 12 months ago, and we rented the property to another tenant. Before we submitted this application, we had over 30 local meetings with 9th and 9th stakeholders, both in the business and residential sector. And that was before we proceeded to community council. So we wanted to have a really thoughtful presentation. And just want to thank everybody for their time and appreciate everybody's thoughtful comments. Thank you so much.
Next we have Ann Charles. Ann?
Hi, I wanted to speak on this issue as well, hearing what a lot of people were saying and then just looking at the plans. These lofts do not look affordable. They do not look like they're preserving the history of this with the modern spin they're putting on it. If we're going to expand housing, I definitely support that. I think it should be made affordable though and accessible. There are way too many people who cannot afford living here, like other people have said, who are now homeless because of it, or having to live in unsafe conditions, or having to do all sorts of things to make sure that they have housing. We should expand it to be affordable and not big condos that are unrealistic for people working an average job. That's all.
Thank you.
All right, I think we can do this. We have Ralph joining via WebEx. Ralph? Oh, here we go. Ralph, are you there?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yay.
Go ahead, Ralph.
Okay. Thank you, council members and Mayor Mendenhall. My name is Ralph Nagasawa. First off, I really appreciate you all the effort you have been doing to try to get me on. My name is Ralph Nagasawa. I'm a principal at MGSA Architects. We've been working with Micah for over the past 7 years on this project. We've gone through many iterations, met with many city council, many city departments and everything. We've addressed all the issues. Mike has also outreached to the community and everything, and we've really worked in all the comments and questions, and we feel we have a really good project here. MGS as a firm, we specialize in historic preservation and multi-use housing. We've been practicing for over 45 years. We have many projects throughout the Salt Lake Valley. As an architect, I believe in this project and ask for your approval on both petitions. I feel the neighborhood and city should be thankful for Micah as developer on this project, because he's really given it his all and shown his commitment to good, sustainable architecture and design. We've been working on this, like I said, we've been working on this project for several years now. And I think the one big impact is being on 800 East. 800 East is such a wide street, has that big center aisle, and the impact of some housing on that street, it will be minor. It'll be a minor inconvenience. It'll have little impact. One big thing what we've done with the street frontage along 800 East there, we've brought the townhomes along the street there to really interact with the sidewalk to make a real commutable project. I believe that we really believe in this project, and I hope for your petition. Okay.
Thank you.
Council, that is all our commenters on this public hearing.
Thank you. I'll look for a motion.
Mr. Chair, I move that the council close the public hearing and defer action to a future.
Second.
I have a motion from Councilmember Mono and a second from Councilmember Valdemoros. Is there any discussion to this item? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and proceed to a roll call vote. Councilmember Rogers.
Yes.
Councilmember Johnston is absent. Councilmember Fowler.
Yes.
Sorry, I don't know why I jumped to you. Councilmember Valdemoros. I could see Anna was going for a button and everything.
Yes.
Councilmember Mono.
Yes.
Councilmember Dugan.
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well. That passes unanimously with one absence. We are at item B15 on our agenda. This is an ordinance that would amend various sections of Title 21A of the Salt Lake City Code pertaining to single room occupancy uses, formerly called shared housing uses. Or sorry, now to be called shared housing uses, formerly called SROs. I will turn the time over to Russell Weeks from the council staff to give a short introduction to this agenda item.
Mr. Chair, this is the first public hearing on this proposed ordinance. And as you said, the proposed ordinance would change the term SRO to shared housing, which some argue better reflects the actual function of that kind of housing. The proposed ordinance would expand the areas where shared housing would be a permitted use. The uses would generally be in all commercially zoned areas. Where they would not be permitted is in most of the, and let me rephrase that, they would be permitted uses in most commercially zoned areas. and they would not be permitted uses in most residentially zoned areas. A lot of effort has been put in, or a lot of comment has been made that this is that if the ordinance were adopted, it would be a good tool to use to help people who do not have housing now. But again, one of the major goals of this proposed ordinance is to provide workforce and student housing that's also affordable for young men and women who want to work and go to school. And I'll leave that at that and turn it over to the public hearing.
Thank you, Russell. Amanda, would you go ahead and open the public comment?
Sure thing. We have Nigel Swaby and George Chapman. Nigel?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. Thank you again, council members. This is the last time you'll hear from me tonight. Over the past 2 weeks, as I've listened in on these sessions, I can't help, based on the comments, but come to the conclusion that the cost of housing in Salt Lake is just too high, whether you're a renter or an owner. And an ordinance like this is going to be able to provide housing options for people who can't otherwise afford it. A few weeks ago, there were a number of homeless advocates speaking to you, and I don't see them or hear them tonight. And this is one of the best things that we can do to help people facing chronic homelessness, be shelter resistant. There are a couple of items that I think you need to consider along with this, because most of the folks that we anticipate going into this sort of housing don't have vehicles. It would be important to reduce the parking requirements for developers for new housing. And it was interesting to hear the clarification of it being in commercial zones. I think you should really make it an effort to experiment with it to begin with in transit zones, which will have the same effect. So thank you again for your time. Thank you especially to Councilmember Wharton and to Councilmember Johnston for addressing the issues that we have on North Temple and taking your time out on Fridays to come over. And thank you all for staying up so late to listen to us.
Thank you for your comments.
Next, we have George Chapman and then Ann Charles. George?
Hi, I'm George Chapman here again. I know you and the city want to help affordable housing, but this proposal does not help affordable housing. This will encourage similar residential units like the infamous crime magnet motels on State Street and North Temple throughout the city. I need to emphasize this. This will encourage low-income apartments throughout the city. Until the city stops the criminal encouragement in the low-cost motels, the city should not be encouraging more. Even the Palmer Court, a supposedly supervised residential facility like an SRO, is the second biggest draw for medical services in this city. It is due to concentrating low income in one facility, and that tends to encourage and enable inappropriate substance abuse. This city has heard many times that mixed income housing is the best for lower income residents, and we're encouraged to support interaction between different economic groups. But this city is not doing it. What happened to this city's policy of mixed income housing? You can do it right now. You have something coming up in the action items. Why aren't you requiring affordable housing with higher building heights? Why aren't you implementing inclusionary zoning? What happened? Why aren't you encouraging, or why aren't you selling all the vacant property that the city owns to developers for a discount to those willing to and capable of building mixed income mixed-use buildings. Do not pass this ordinance. It actually makes society worse, in my opinion. Thanks for listening.
And next we have Ann Charles. Ann?
Hi, thank you for letting me speak again. I really appreciated the explanation that Russell had given to this because I didn't really understand it before that. And I really do support that strongly. I think the previous speaker before me, I found very upsetting. I work with a lot of clients, again, who are working through addiction, and a lot of them go into sober living after this. And I really support the county's work in that. It's been really helpful. But the way he was speaking about people who are in addiction was really triggering for me. But I really support you guys doing this, and I think it'd be a really good idea and it would help a lot of people. Thanks.
Council, that is all the speakers for this public hearing.
Mute.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
did somebody make a motion? My computer froze for a minute. No?
Nope, go ahead.
Then I move that the council close the public hearing and note that a second public hearing has been scheduled for November 10th.
Second.
I have a motion from Councilmember Fowler, a second from Councilmember Dugan. Is there any discussion of this item? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and proceed to a roll call vote. Councilmember Rogers.
Yes.
Councilmember Johnson is absent. Councilmember Valdemoros.
Yes.
Councilmember Mono.
Yes.
Councilmember Dugan.
Yes.
Councilmember Fowler.
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well. That passes unanimously with one absent. We are now at item B16, which is budget amendment number 3 for fiscal year 2020 to 2021, which will be delayed and rescheduled for an upcoming council meeting due to problems associated with public noticing. This brings us to one potential action item, which is C1. And that is an ordinance that would increase the building heights within a portion of the GMU or Gateway Mixed Use Zoning District from a current maximum of 120 feet up to 190 feet across portions of 2 separate blocks located between 500 West and the railroad tracks at approximately 625 West and 200 South and 400 South.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I move that we defer action on this matter to a future council date.
Is there a second? I have a motion from Councilmember Fowler and a second from Councilmember Dugan. Is there any discussion of this item? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and move to a roll call vote. Councilmember Rogers.
Yes.
Councilmember Johnson is absent. Councilmember Valdemoros.
Yes.
Councilmember Mono.
Yes.
Councilmember Dugan.
Yes.
Councilmember Fowler.
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well. That passes unanimously with one absent. We are now at part D, which is the comment section of our agenda. Are there any questions? Oh, I'm sorry. No, we're not. Yes, we are. Are there any questions from the council staff to the mayor?
Mr. Chair, is this the general comment section from the public?
That will be next.
Oh, sorry.
There's a little, I think they're swapped on the agenda. Normally we go the other way around.
That's what I was getting.
Yes. Okay, I don't see any comments, so we'll go ahead and move to item C2, which is the general comment portion of our agenda. We welcome general comments on any topic. I'd like to restate our rules of decorum for those who may have joined late. It's important to us that we provide a safe space and a place for people to feel comfortable and respected to participate. So to help facilitate that comment period, we ask that you please avoid yelling or making racial slurs, obscene or defamatory remarks. The council respects all points of view and we welcome any new insights. If a caller is not respectful, you'll be given one warning, and if the caller continues not to follow the council's meeting rules, we will need to mute your microphone or disconnect the call. Robert Nutzman from the council staff will continue to help coordinate with meeting attendees for public comment. Please monitor the chat screen for information and/or feel free to message our staff with any questions. Again, the staff member's name is Robert Nutzman. Amanda Lau will be calling the names of callers and unmuting lines. In addition, we will be accepting callers through a phone line. We appreciate everyone's patience as we make our way through this list of people who are here to make a comment. Once we open the comment, we will list 3 names at a time so that people can have some notice and be prepared to speak. If you do not wish to speak, please message our staff to let them know when the host states your name, and you can indicate that you're just here to listen. If you do wish to speak, when the meeting host unmutes your line, please state your name and the 2 minutes for your comments will begin. At the 2-minute mark, the host will announce time and your microphone will be muted. Of course, if you're unable to complete your full comments, you can always reach out to the City Council at P.O. Box 145-476, Salt Lake City, Utah 84114-5476. Or you can email us at council.comments@slcgov.com. Or you can contact our 24-hour phone line, which is 801-535-7654. Amanda, will you please start with the first commenter?
Sure thing. Thank you, Council Chair. And just a quick note, I see that we have 19 people here right now. So first we have Eliza McKinney, followed by Chris Martensen, and then Kelly Martensen. Eliza?
Hi, I am calling to ask the mayor specifically to stop the community commitment program, specifically to remove any use of law enforcement or camp closures as part of this plan. It is an ineffective use of resources and does not center the needs of unsheltered people. It is clear that decisions are continuing to be made about unsheltered people rather than with unsheltered people. I was happy to see the acknowledgement in the work meeting today that outreach takes months, even years of consistent and compassionate relationship building. 3 weeks of outreach does not come close to providing this needed care. I want to remind the mayor that if people are refusing services, they have good reasons for doing so. These reasons need to be listened to and services need to be adapted, not the other way around. Specifically, drug treatment and enforced sobriety do not equal compassionate care and universal shelter. I would also remind the mayor that the 2020 point-in-time count shows a 39% increase in unsheltered individuals since 2019, and people experiencing chronic homelessness has increased by 19%. Despite the massive layoffs nationwide, the cost of housing has not gone down within our city. These issues need to be prioritized and planned as a crisis that require immediate harm reduction, not a quick fix for developers to clean up the neighborhoods they want to capitalize on. I'm relieved to see efforts moving forward for emergency overflow for the winter season, but I again ask the mayor and the council to not use law enforcement or camp closures during this process. Thank you.
Thank you.
And next we have Chris Martensen, and thank you, Kelly, for listening, followed by Emily Allworth, and then Katie Papas. Chris?
I'm Chris Martensen. I'm here today to be a voice for the preborn that are being brutally killed in our state and in this city. God commands us not to murder. This law is for every human life, including the victims of rape and incest. Under God's law, the rapist deserves the death penalty, not the child. Roe versus Wade is a fictional law. The Supreme Court upholds the Constitution, not opinions. The law is based on the premise that what's in the womb has the potential for human life. Proverbs 24 says, rescue those being taken away to death, hold back those stumbling to the slaughter. We know it's life at conception, so why are we waiting for a tyrannical government to overturn Roe versus Wade? It's time to give protection to all children and human life in Utah and stop waiting for the government for permission. You will all be held accountable before God for not acting, and you're violating your duty under Utah by not acting. This week, there will be dozens of babies that will have their arms torn from their sockets, disemboweled, and heads crushed. Senator McKay of Riverton said under his bill that government's primary function is to protect life. Carrie Ann Lisenby said that this bill is meant to, quote, discourage the taking of human life. When is it okay to take a baby's life? When she is young? Or if there's a financial difficulty, is it up to the mom to decide? Boys and girls are dying every day. They all need protection from murder. In Psalms 139, the Bible says, you knit me together in your mother's womb. The Bible says that a baby is a baby at the moment of conception. They are made in the image of God, and we are commanded by God and government under God to protect them, and it's your duty to protect them. Don't worry, don't wait another minute. Please stop these killings and end abortion now. Thanks.
Next comment.
Next, we have Emily Allworth, followed by Katie Pappas, and then Lee Stanhope. Emily?
Hi, thank you. I would first just like to reply to the person before me and advocate that they use the energy that they have to, confront victims of rape and incest, and instead put that energy towards wearing a mask and telling others around you to, and giving them the resources to. I would say take up sewing, make masks for people around you. If you care about human life, then prioritize the pandemic at hand. I would also like to comment on budget amendment number 3 and ask to pass the A3 Racial Equity in Policing Committee. I think it's a really awesome amendment that makes a lot of sense to me, and I like seeing where the tax dollars are being allocated, especially when it comes to issues like these. Thank you.
Next commenter.
Next, we have Katie Pappas, followed by Lee Stanhope, and then Nancy McHugh. Katie?
Hi, my name is Katie Pappas. I live in Council District 3 in Salt Lake City. I'd like to read the first sentence of the Climate Positive 2040 report put out by the Salt Lake City Office of Sustainability. Salt Lake City is committed to protecting the public health and safety of its residents, including access to clean air, clean water, and a livable environment. The report has a lot of good ideas and goals addressing climate change and the health of residents. My concern is with the development of the inland port near the Great Salt Lake in the northwest part of the city. Attempts to get definitive answers from the Utah Inland Port Authority Board regarding impacts of the port are ignored. There is no dialogue available to taxpayers and stakeholders regarding the inland port. Questions submitted at board meetings go unanswered. In fact, on page 7 of the Utah Inland Port Authority Strategic Business Plan, it states, Utah Inland Port Authority has no land use authority in the inland port area. Land use authority in this area rests with the municipalities, Salt Lake City, West Valley City, and Magna. That statement suggests that ultimately issues surrounding sustainable development, water use, air pollution, stormwater runoff, and even size and scope of development must be managed by Salt Lake City. I'm asking the Salt Lake City Council to honor the commitments made by the Office of Sustainability and help us to make those goals a reality. A thorough study of potential harms to the area, as well as a health impact assessment, should be done by independent experts, not representing port interests. Perhaps we could enlist the help of the University of Utah. This should happen before any further development occurs. The livability of the Salt Lake Valley depends on all of our ability to envision a different future, one where economic development is not the only consideration. I look forward to hearing from you on this important proposal. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have Lee Stanhope, followed by Nancy McHugh, and then Patrick Rasband. Lee?
Good evening. My name is Lee Stanhope, and I currently reside in Salt Lake City in Council District 5. Since I learned of the Utah Inland Port, I have been concerned about the potential for increased air, water, light, and noise pollution. After a long wait, the UIPA business plan was released. It offered numerous suggestions for developing a green port, but included absolutely no rules or regulations to enforce those suggestions. And in fact, observing the current building projects in process, it appears the developers are not following recommendations from the business plan if it means spending more money. However, I was encouraged recently by the release of the Climate and Clean Air Quality Compact, signed by numerous local leaders, including several that I believe are on this call, and several more who are strong advocates for the inland port, including Jack Hedges, the executive director of UIPA. It's time to find out if this port can really be as green as we've been told. To that end, I propose that the Salt Lake City Council urge their representative on the UIPA board to petition the UIPA board to fund, with the taxpayers' money, a health impact assessment, or HIA. An HIA, by definition, is a flexible process to give policymakers tools to integrate health impacts into their consideration of individual projects. Based on these evaluations, HIAs first determine and then evaluate likely potential health impacts. Based on these evaluations, HIAs then create an actionable, recommendable recommendations intended to mitigate or eliminate these impacts deemed harmful or beneficial. An HIA tailored to the unique environment would answer many of the concerns of all of us. I hope the City Council will join me in urging for the UIPA board to fund an HIA. Thank you.
Okay, next comment.
Next, we have Patrick Rasband, followed by Pamela Starley, and then Ann Charles. Patrick?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Thanks. I'm calling to request that the city enforce the laws regarding camping within city limits. I'd like to ask the city to continue using abatement orders to get these camps off of the streets. The camps mustn't be allowed to continue to thrive in our city. I mean, they're havens for unsanitary conditions, drug and alcohol abuse, lewd acts, and property crime. There are people in these camps who truly need help, and I would ask the council to continue to support the mayor's initiatives in this regard. But the fact remains that there are unsavory characters who use the plight of the needy to blend in and commit crimes right out in the open, often preying upon these same homeless who we should be trying to reach. Instead, the criminal allowance allows the cycle of addiction to thrive, as well as put a stigma on the homeless population as a whole. It becomes difficult to tell who is who. These camps pose a sanitation hazard and a safety hazard to the hardworking citizens of this city who deserve to be able to walk their children down the street or sleep in peace at night without having to worry who is going to come past through your yard or what property is going to come up missing tonight. This lack of enforcement is going to contribute to a negative impression of the city for our residents, our friends in the county, and the rest of the state, as well as tourists and businesses. So I'd urge the city to enforce abatements to clean up the criminal, safety, and sanitary elements while also providing housing and services for those that need them. Finally, I'd like to thank Chris Wharton and Andrew Johnson for your time on Friday afternoons. I know it's probably thankless, but we appreciate you listening. And I'd urge the mayor and the rest of the council to come out. You've got a lot of frustrated and hopeless people out there who'd like to know why their daughters get attacked by the same junkies every day. Thank you for your time.
Next, we have Pamela Starley, followed by Ann Charles, and then George Chapman. Pamela?
Hi, I'm Pamela Starley, and I'd like to pose a question to the council members and have them answer yes or no, if they're willing to. And in the past few days, I've been involved in a really robust discussion about a housing project. And the neighbors in that area have come to understand that the housing project by the developer is the way it is because of zoning, the definition of the zoning in that master plan. My question to you guys is, are you willing to amend or modify the master plan in what I guess is an arduous process, but are you even willing to look at that and possibly make a change to a zoning in a neighborhood?
So, Pamela, the format for this is that this is your opportunity to speak to us as council members. It's not a dialogue back and forth where we answer questions. So if you want to continue, we'll let you finish your time, but we don't typically, or as a rule, we don't answer questions during this period.
How can I find out the answer to that question?
So you can always email any council members and ask them for their response, or you can call them and reach out to them one-on-one. Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Pamela.
Next, we have Ann Charles, followed by George Chapman, and then we have Hidalgo de la Flor. Sorry, thank you. Ann Charles.
Hi, I first wanted to thank Mayor Mendenhall for pushing the governor to be more mindful and just better about COVID precautions. I really appreciated some more work being done on that. And secondly, I wanted to talk about the community commitment program. I was listening to your guys' work session today, and I took note of the 162 people that you had made contact with, and then only 80 of those being offered services. I think that is something that was really concerning. And also hearing that 5 people wanted to access services, but there were barriers that prevented them from doing that. I think it really shows the importance of not continuing camp abatements, because people do not have places to go if they are moved. Clearly, like 5 people, that is still too many, who are going to be pushed out of a living space where there is none for them. I think you really need to look at that. Winter is coming. Like, there will be more people who lose their homes over the course of the next several months because of like COVID and the impact it's having on our lives and our economy, and just really, really rethinking that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have George Chapman, followed by Hidalgo de la Flor. And that is all the names I see so far. George Chapman, go ahead.
Okay, at risk of creating a riot, I appreciate the mayor's attention to and transparency on police staffing. Although thousands want fewer police, tens of thousands in our city want more visible cops. The mayor has previously successfully fought for her community's request for 50 more cops, and we are now vacant 38 funded sworn officers and 24 civilians as of October 16th. The mayor is right. We are losing 2 to 3 officers a month due to problems with Utah's retirement system laws. That's not Salt Lake City's fault. But this city's citizens and businesses are begging for more police, and specifically police walking patrols. Since we are not arresting drug users, we need to discourage criminal activity. And I encourage you in the next budget amendment to add more funding for the police and/or cameras, mobile cop cams, $40,000 each, and speed feedback signs. Without cops, we need to have some other options. And if you're not going to fund more police, please fund more cameras. But the police walking patrols actually make sense. They're not there to arrest people. They're not there to harass people. They're actually there to engage with the community and encourage fewer victim crimes. Remember what the hotel said last time? The hotels are getting complaints with aggressive panhandling. Please consider police walking patrols and more police mobile cameras. Thanks for listening.
Thank you.
And lastly, we have Hidalgo de la Flor. Hidalgo?
Yes, can you hear me?
We can barely hear you, but yes.
Okay, I'm calling in. I am a Mestizo resident of Salt Lake City, and I'm calling in to make a comment about the proclamation that was adopted by the City Council and the Mayor. And although I appreciate the intent and the sentiment of that proclamation, it's a little troublesome in that the term Native American was used instead of indigenous people. As you may know, America comes from the Italian Vespucci, that name, and it was given around the 1500s. And clearly, the indigenous people were here long before that. And so I feel that it's important that the correct terminology be used if we are going to do such proclamation, because if not, then it comes out more as virtue signaling rather than a sincere intent to recognize the indigenous peoples of this area. Also, it's somewhat of a slap in the face to have someone of Spanish descent read the proclamation. It's akin to having a conquistador tell the indigenous people that they love them after the terror and the horror that the conquistadors committed. Finally, I understand from the work meeting that the mayor and the city council members have a meeting with the school board, and I would ask that during that meeting, if you could please ask the school board to grow up and do something in a narrative for Salt Lake City. Thank you.
Yeah, I hear that. We offer council members an opportunity to read resolutions, and we're not going to make decisions about who gets to read resolutions based on their ethnic heritage or anything like that. So just sorry, everyone, point of personal privilege. I wanted to address that because I think that kind of I don't think it violates our rules, but I think it comes close to the line, and I want people to, or maybe it does violate our rules. I'm not sure, but I want to acknowledge that that's not acceptable, and we're not going to. Please remind yourselves of the rules for participation. Thank you, Councilmember Fowler.
Mr. Chair, may I have a point of personal privilege quickly? And it's not having anything to do with our last caller. I just very quickly wanted to say thank you to our council staff. After receiving numerous comments after our last last formal hearing, our staff has been working what seems like nonstop to figure out a more efficient and, dare I say, as much as easier as it can get system for really trying to make sure that the members of our residents who want to speak at our formal hearings are heard, and that they're heard based on the items that they want to be able to speak to. I thought that today went really well. It was incredibly well organized, but that means that all of that staff had to work double or triple time to put into this. Amanda and Bobby doing all of their work that they're doing, but then it also includes all of our analysts who are giving us even another brief of an introduction before getting into the public hearing. So I'm impressed. This has been a lot for all of us in a lot of different ways, a long 8 months or so. And yet our staff continues to be innovative and creative and work really hard to make sure that people have access to these public meetings. And so I thought tonight went really well, and I just wanted to kind of give a shout out to them. I liked the new format, so thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Dugan, did you? Okay. Amanda, do we have any further commenters?
Council Chair, we do not.
Mr.
Okay.
Chair,
Yes.
it's Cindy. I just wanted to also clarify that without Cindy Lou Trishman, we would be toast. So
Yes.
she is really instrumental as a teammate as the city recorder in helping us with all this. So we've had to rely on a lot of people, IMS and everybody. So thank you.
Thank you, Cindy. I meant to say hi to Cindy Lou too. It's good to see your name.
Yes, and definitely second all of those. I think everybody on the council is so appreciative of staff's work, making sure that we can get through these public comment periods. And I know that I know how complicated it is because we've talked through it many times. So thank you. I want to echo that thank you as well. Okay, we are at thanks Amanda too for regulating that and Robert. We have no new business items scheduled, so that brings us to our unfinished business items on the agenda. Item F1 is a resolution that would authorize the city to pick up or cover qualifying Tier 2 public safety and firefighter employee retirement contributions.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I move that the council approve a resolution authorizing the city to pick up contributions for employees who are qualifying members of the public safety and firefighter Tier 2 retirement system. I don't know why that was a tongue twister for me today.
Second it.
All right, I have a motion from Councilmember Fowler and a second from Councilmember Dugan. Is there any discussion to this item? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and proceed to a roll call vote. Councilmember Rogers.
Yes.
Councilmember Johnston is absent. Councilmember Valdemoros.
Yes.
Councilmember Amano.
Yes.
Councilmember Dugan.
Yes.
Councilmember Fowler.
Yes.
And I am a yes as well. That's unanimous with one person absent. We are at item F2 on the agenda, which is a resolution that would update the city's 2020 to 2024 consolidated plan as required by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, or HUD. I'll look for a motion.
Mr. Chair, I move that we adopt.
Thank you, Councilmember Rogers. Thank you, Councilmember Rogers, for the motion. Second from Councilmember Fowler. Is there any discussion to this item? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and proceed to a roll call vote. Councilmember Rogers.
Yes.
Councilmember Johnston is absent. Councilmember Valdemoros.
Yes.
Councilmember Mono.
Yes.
Councilmember Dugan.
Yes.
Councilmember Fowler.
Yes.
And I am a yes as well. That passes unanimously with one absent. Council members, we are now at Part G of the agenda, which is the consent portion. I will look for a motion.
Mr. Chair, I further move that we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Thank you. I have a motion from Councilmember Rogers, a second from Councilmember Fowler. Is there any discussion to this? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and proceed to a roll call vote.
Mr. Chair, this is Brian Fulmer.
Yes.
Excuse me. At the briefing today on the Warm Springs Road vacation, there was discussion about holding only one public hearing. It's on the consent agenda for two public hearings. So I'm guessing you would have the option to amend the consent agenda to include only one public hearing for that item.
Yes. Councilmember Rogers, would you like to amend your motion?
Yes, please.
Go ahead.
I would like to amend my motion to include the one-time public hearing for the vacation of the 800 North Warm Springs Road alley vacation.
Thank you. Councilmember Fowler, do you still second that?
Yes.
All right, thank you. And Brian, thank you for pointing that out. We'll go ahead and proceed to a roll call vote. Councilmember Rogers.
Yes.
Councilmember Johnston is absent. Councilmember Waldemoros.
Yes.
Councilmember Mono.
Yes.
Councilmember Dugan.
Yes.
Councilmember Fowler.
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well. That passes unanimously. That is the end of our agenda, council members. Thank you thanks for sticking with us. It's been a long night. Everyone, have a good night. Meeting adjourned.
To keep that top of mind, that we need to make sure that these students have access to broadband and the computers, the laptops, and the Chromebooks to do that. But this will be addressed on a district by district or charter by charter basis as they watch these numbers go up, and as they go down, they will go back to the previous method of instruction, which is typically the in-class instruction.
But is there any plans for additional protections, more PPEs, or additional measures being taken as we see these cases climb?
I'm not sure, Ben, what other additional measures that you might be referring to. We have PPE that has gone out to all of the districts. The districts are responsible. I appreciate the opportunity to explain this. Districts are responsible for PPE. They all received CARES Act funding, and they are using a lot of that CARES Act funding in districts and charter for PPE. So they are responsible for that. In addition to that,